And
We're good.
we're good. Perfect. Hey everyone. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. This is episode 227. Was that what you said?
227. And truth be told, we already had this intro
Yeah.
twice.
we have been struggling to get this to run today. I am completely blaming me, but apparently I have done the impossible and crashed OBS. OBS is a platform that we use to tie all this together, as it were. If anyone is ever in the future wondering how Ben and Roberto do this, we have no idea. Don't ask us. it is
It's magic.
it is literally magic, and we really don't know what's happening here. Anyways, this week we are talking about how to keep cool. Now, this is a problem me and Robert don't really have because we are just such cool people. But the reality is, he
Oh,
didn't
that's
see
a
that
bad
coming.
joke.
He did not see that coming. The reality is, yeah, summer's here. It is quite hot, and heat exhaustion is a real thing. Anyone who's never experienced heat exhaustion, I advise you to just avoid it at all costs. If there's ever a point you think you're going to suffer from heat exhaustion, do something about that beforehand. It does tend to, in my opinion, linger for quite a while, and it can make you quite miserable. There are quite a few symptoms, but dizziness, fatigue are amongst many of them. Nausea can be another one. Essentially, heat exhaustion is when your body is too hot to properly perform its functions, and you lose the ability to properly control your heat. Um, so, how do we prevent that? Um,
I mean, the first thing most people are going to say is drink lots of water. And you know what? This was the first thing that came to mind because I had this conversation today when we were talking. Well, I had it with somebody else, but then I talked to you about the topic tonight. And what they were saying was, and if anybody isn't aware, our global listeners there, here in Atlantic Canada, we're going through a heat wave. Atlantic Canada never gets that warm. Like the temperatures we're going to talk about, some of you may go, rookies, those are rookie numbers. You got to pump those up. But truth be told, Nova Scotia is not like a hot province. In Canada, Eastern Canada, we get a lot of north winds. It's cooler. So we're sitting, like today, for instance, we were sitting around 32 degrees Celsius, I believe it was. And for those that don't use Celsius there, I think that's around like 89, 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Which once again, you can say rookie numbers, whatever, but then we have humidity on top of that. We get what's called a humidex. And the humidex, the last probably 3, 4 days, has been pushing that very close to 40 degrees Celsius. And if I do my math right, I think it's around like 104 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that. And don't get me wrong, this is shady math at its finest. But yeah, that's hot. That's hot for me. You know what I mean? Us here in Nova Scotia specifically, we're not used to 40-degree weather. A hot summer for us used to be like in around the 30s, like we talked about. That's with the humidity. That's usually like reverb happening. Yeah, we had that last time. I think it's because of your parents' kitchen and it's vibrating all around. It's the only place I can actually get any service in here. So if there is, oh, you know what I can do? You keep chatting, Ben. I'm going to go grab my headset and see if that gets rid of it. Hold on one sec.
okay, yes. So, he mentioned drinking water. I was actually trying to look it up because I did see something the other day. There was an article I had read where they've actually found the peak temperature that the human body can actually survive any length of time at, and it is in the 40s, I believe. If I could find the article, I might share it. The reality is, I don't know that's 100% like a set rule. Um, yeah, but yeah, the hotter it goes, I know that for me, the less and less able I am to do a lot of things. Okay, Mr. Roberto is back.
You hear me now, Ben?
Well, I hear you clear. I wonder if they can.
Hey, Melly, I know you're in the comments there. Is the reverb gone? Because if it's not, it is definitely the location as to where I'm at.
It is
And
a
I don't
nicer
have.
sound from my side.
Okay. So, yeah, I missed what you were saying there, Ben. Catch me up if you would, bud.
I was saying I'd read an article the other day where they actually determine what the max temperature humans can actually kind of survive at and where optimal temperatures sit. And I think anything over 28, it starts to get to the point where people really start to sweat. And as you get to those higher temperatures, our body has more and more trouble dealing with the heat. And I think it's somewhere in the 40s that we start to see true failure. Um, and on the flip side, um, you start to see shivering at slightly under 20 degrees. And as we start to shiver, we consume more energy. Now, it's easier for us to produce heat than it is for us to shed heat. Uh, at high, you know, so at low temperatures, we can really work out. Anyone who's been out in the winter cutting wood and stuff, no, you can pretty well go shirtless if you're splitting and dragging a lot of work. Like your body's building up more heat than it can dissipate, even in the winter. Um, on the flip side, in a hot temperature, as you work, you're still building that heat, and you have to dissipate it. Now, drinking a lot of water helps because your body's natural way of dissipating heat is through breathing and through moisture evaporation. But the fact is, that's only so efficient. Um, and as we sweat, we also lose a lot of minerals and salts from our system.
And this is where my original chat was going here. And for everybody listening, I do know there's a little bit of reverb. I'm going to say it's just the room I'm sitting in because there's a lot of echo here. But yeah, so what we were talking about was literally just that. In the hot weather, everybody's like, oh, just drink lots of fluids, drink lots of fluids, drink lots of fluids, or more specifically, drink lots of water, which is not a bad thing. But water alone doesn't necessarily replenish electrolytes. And without a little bit of that electrolyte in there, you're going to get heat cramping and stuff like that. You may not dehydrate. Well, you still can. But anyway, it's going to cause heat cramps and stuff like that. So the big thing I wanted to get across was for your fluids, try to get some sort of an electrolyte substance in there. So like the Powerades, Gatorades, they're great. Or simply if you have water, I think it's a eighth of a teaspoon of salt to a liter will give you a, you won't taste the salt in your water, but that still gives you a little bit of electrolytes in your system, and you need that for proper functioning. So in really hot weather, if you're just drinking straight water, and especially if it's like distilled water or something like that, it's it could potentially lead you down the heat cramping road. You may stay somewhat cool. You may not get into heat exhaustion, but heat cramps aren't fun either, in all honesty.
No, a heat cramp is extremely painful and can actually cause like your muscles to sort of lock and to get extremely tight, and it hurts a lot. And even if once you kind of like get rid of it, the muscles still suffer some degree of damage. I find. So it takes a while to heal from that. So you really want to avoid that. So in areas of extreme heat, you do have to make sure you're taking in your electrolytes. And in an emergency, that could be as little as adding some salt to your water. Um, if you have access to it, things like Gatorade, Powerade, those things actually have electrolytes added in them. And there are tablets you can get you throw in that Search and Rescue we carry. So yeah, definitely stick with that. I don't know if I repeated something from you, but to beat heat for me, I know I've been playing with this, but just a handkerchief or the buffs, if you soak it in water and put it around your neck and even across like your back or your chest area, that's going to suck a lot of heat out of your body and can kind of get it away. Or submerge yourself into a fluid, ideally water. But
I mean, yeah, ideally water. And funny enough, Nomadic Hacker joined us here in the comms along with Melissa. That's one of his favorite methods too. Is exactly what you were saying. It's just a wet bandana method, either around your neck or on your wrist, as long as you are on major veins to cool your blood. And that's a really good point there too. Depending on where you put these cooler things, will dictate how effectively they're going to cool you down. And like Hacker said there, if you can get like the inside of your wrists, around your carotids, the inside of your legs, and around your ankles, believe it or not, anywhere where the veins are really close to the skin, it's going to cool you more effectively. So in a hot day, even if you're not out in the woods, if you have some ice or something like that, If you put it in like a cloth, I don't recommend putting it directly on your body because you know you can potentially get frostbite, stuff like that. But if you put an ice pack or a cool pack on the inside of your arms, that'll cool you down very effectively.
Yeah. Um, I also, if I have like a hat or something, oftentimes you'll see me actually. I'll just take my hat and dunk it right in the water and put that hat on my head that's wet, because they say you lose 80%, 90% of the heat through your head. I don't know if that's truly true, but like in the winter, if you're wearing a jacket and pants and gloves and hat, it's your face and head that's generally not as well protected. So in those cases, you do lose a lot of your heat from your head. But the reality is, there is a lot of veins. There's a lot of stuff going on in your head that creates heat. So cooling that down helps cool the rest of your body. Um, and vice versa. If you're wearing like an insulated hat in a summer day, it'll actually really heat you up a lot quicker, and you want to be aware of that. I wear a lot of times like a Tilly style hat, and it's got a thin piece of foam. I really like it. It keeps the sun off my face and my ears, even my neck to a certain degree. But I do find the heat builds up, and then I'll take it off, and I can really feel a difference. So be aware of that. If you're wearing something on your head, it can make dissipating the heat a little harder. Um, and I'll take something from any culture I can. And if you ever noticed, like the the stereotypical, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, like the Chinese style hat that's suspended off the head. I think that has a purpose. It allows air to blow under the hat and clear out a heat buildup while keeping the sun off of their bodies. And this, you see it traditionally used in like rice fields and when they're in other fields where they're out in the heat. There's nowhere to get away from the sun. There's no shade, and so they sort of carry this piece of shade with them that's suspended off of their body a bit.
And yeah, that's exactly right. Air movement is great. And just before I miss it here, Red Bear is joining us in the comments as well. And he said the evaporation is more effective at cooling you off than anything. And that's true. And the problem right now here, at least in our, where I'm at, is the humidity doesn't allow you to sweat. So what I mean is you can sweat, but the sweat doesn't evaporate off your body. And that's truly what starts cooling you is when you sweat, the water evaporates, pulls heat with it, and that's what cools you down, like Red Bear is saying. So if you got too high humidity, your ability to sweat, it just kind of sits on your body, and now you have a blanket of just wet water essentially sitting on you that's heating up to your body temperature, and you just feel really hot, and of course you get swampy and stuff like that, and then it leads to chafing and all that nonsense. So in that kind of event, you are far better off to carry some sort of sweat rag. You know what I mean? Be it the bandana or something like that, and actually wipe the sweat off your body as effectively as you can. It's gonna keep you a little bit cooler, but more specifically, hopefully, it's going to lead to less chafing, blistering, and things like that, right? So, what you said, Ben, carrying the shade with you, amazing thing to do in any kind of hot weather because the sun, I mean, it's going to heat you up in a couple different ways. You're going to have that radiant heat. Then you're going to have the UV effect on there too, and sunburns and stuff like that. And as your skin sunburns, if you are somebody like me that sunburns easily, that starts self-generating heat too, right? Because your body tries to combat the burn, kind of kicks into overdrive, and that actually increases your body temperature as well, or your core temperature. So if you can prevent sunburn, you're effectively going to prevent some overheating as well. So that's where your sunscreens really come into their own. Or what I like better, because I don't like sunscreen, I hate the feel of it, shade. So I wear long sun shirts, but thin sun shirts. You can go on Amazon and you can actually pick up what's called a UV protective sun shirt. It's long sleeve, it's paper thin, but it'll fully protect you from the UV rays, and it's moisture wicking. So when you do sweat, it tends to come out, it tends to evaporate off a little better. And then, much like yourself, I wear a wide brim hat. Mine happens to be leather. It's a little hot. That's the only thing I don't care for this time of year. But the trade off is it's nice and wide and it protects my entire face and neck from sun. And as I'm walking through the woods, it keeps stuff from going down into my neck, and it keeps me cleaner. And cleaners we've talked about in past episodes just generally makes you feel better when you're in the woods. If you get really grimy, um, puts extra stress in your body too, and that's going to lead to more irritation when you're sweating and you just don't feel good. And I'm sure we've all been there before where you are just out in the woods, you've been sweating all day, and you just kind of feel gross at the end of the day. And when you have that feeling, that's basically where you're running the high risk of that chafing and stuff that we talked about before. So, another good thing at the end of the day, or periodically, if you're lucky enough, stop and give yourself kind of a kind of quick wash. We've talked about these products in the past, like wet wipes, the one wipes, the one towel, the man wipes, uh, the shower in a bag, whatever you want to call them. Some of them have menthol in it. That also works pretty good because the menthol will kind of give a cooling effect to your skin.
Yeah. Um, I actually tried that method a lot over the last week, and we spent 4 days out camping, and yeah, the wet wipes do help, and they do keep you clean. It does not replace a full shower, and I like the idea of a menthol product. And you can, if you ever doubt that, just like take a menthol gum and see how much cooler your mouth feels afterwards. I mean, it just does have that really strong, clean, cleansing, cooling feel. Um, we both mentioned shade, and I you can't emphasize that enough. Like, yes, if it's hot, get out of the sun. Uh, it makes a huge difference. You will notice a significant difference between being in direct sunlight and being out of the direct sunlight. So if you're in a field, get away from the field, get into the tree line. If there's a nowhere like that, look for something that's creating a shadow and be inside that shadow area. Getting away from the direct sun definitely will help a lot. And the other thing is evaporation really requires two things to work well. One is water to evaporate, and two is airflow to kind of pull that off. So if you can get a bit of a breeze going with that moisture, it becomes infinitely better. Do be aware that that same effect in cooler weather is the very thing you want to avoid. So um, be careful of that, and especially anywhere where temperatures can change drastically. And an example of this would be like a lot of desert areas. During the day, you could be to the point of heat exhaustion, and at night, you can literally get frostbite in the same area. And the thing is, somebody might soak themselves down, and then as the sun falls, they won't dry enough before it gets to the dangerous point. So, um, paying attention to the weather and the day conditions. In extreme heat, avoid travel during the hottest time of day. Avoid doing anything strenuous when it's going to be the most hot. So what you do is you do this stuff in the early morning, in the evening, and yeah, you'll find a great advantage there. The other products that are available, and these are more of an emergency thing than a daily thing, in my opinion. There are some really good products out there that you can use. They come in first aid kits. Correct me if you've, or, but it's like a compact ice, like where you break a thing and it'll actually create a cooling. You can use
Yeah,
those
so it's like the complete opposite of the hot packs. If anybody's
yeah.
ever seen the chemical hot packs, it's got the little blister thing inside. You break it, chemical reaction, and it gets hot. If I'm not mistaken, and I didn't mean to cut you off here, Ben, but I think it's saltpeter, water, and iodine or something like that is the reaction. I can't remember what it is, but you can look it up. You can make at home cool packs. They're not as effective as the bought ones, but I mean, in a pinch, they will work.
Yeah, so it's an endothermic reaction, a reaction that takes heat away from the environment, as opposed to an exothermic reaction, which creates heat. Well, that endothermic reaction will actually create a cooler thing. So if you place that in your body, it will act very similarly, and you can cool yourself down. This is often used in first aid kits for strains and sprains when you're trying to cool and you don't have access to a refrigerator and ice or snow. So those are some things you can definitely do.
So hacker just nomadic hacker joined in here. It's ammonia nitrate and water to make the cooling packs. And Red Bear said he carries a 3x3 tarp so he can set up his own shade. The tarp, amazing idea. As Ben mentioned earlier, make sure there's airflow. Don't pitch it in a low wedge and crawl under it. You're going to trap a lot of heat in there, and you're basically going to turn yourself into an oven. This is the time to lift that back up a little, let the airflow kind of go through, and take all that moisture off your body with it as it's going. But they're nomadic hacker, but they only last about 5 minutes and they are bulky. Yeah, there's some other combination too there, hacker. I can't remember what it is that lasts a little longer, but you can't beat the store-bought ones, honestly. You can get them in the first aid sections in most supply stores, and they're not terribly expensive, or at least they weren't. With everything going now, I honestly can't remember. Like, I don't know anymore. Um, but yeah, those gel packs too. You can go into most pharmacies, Lawtons, things like that. At least that's the stores here. But you know, some sort of drugstore, and they'll sell the large gel packs, cooling gel packs that you put in your freezer. Um, and honestly, if you have a cooler and you throw a couple of those in there, I have been in the woods, gotten really, really hot, and had to make the call: is it better to try and keep my food cool, or is it better to keep me cool? And hopefully, you can kind of split the difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cool yourself and eat the stuff that's going to be immediately affected by that less cooling effect. But at the end of the day, keeping your food good, that's all great and dandy. But if you go into heat exhaustion or heat stroke, even worse, that food's useless to you. And remember the rules of sevens. You can generally go like 7 days without food, and I don't want to say be okay, but very survivable.
Yeah. But was it 7 hours without shelter?
Uh, yeah, seven. I said remember the rules of seven, and I can't remember what they are now. Give me a sec. I'll look that up. You go ahead, Ben.
But I mean, the reality is like the environment can be dangerous. Too hot, too cold, and that's what the shelters do. The shelters do both of it. I think my camera froze on the app.
Oh, it's not the rules of seven. It's the rules of three, first of all, so I had that wrong. You don't look froze up to me, Ben. Everything looks good there, bud.
Well, that's good because I'm froze on mine.
Oh, on your end, did you close down your window that has your webcam in it? Because sometimes that'll freak out OBS, especially if you're using Chrome. Sorry, folks, we're giving Ben a crash course in OBS as we're going to, or OSB, or whatever the heck that program's called. But the rules of three. You can survive 3 minutes without breathable air. You can survive 3 hours in a harsh environment without shelter. You can survive 3 days without drinkable water, and you can survive up to 3 weeks without food.
Yeah.
And now you're just missing altogether. That's okay. The trees in the background are quite nice. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of what we talked about here tonight, what we're going to talk about, kind of seems like common sense. But remember, folks, there is no such thing as common sense anymore. There's only acquired knowledge, and we're hoping that's what we're doing here is helping you folks acquire a little of that knowledge. What seems like common sense to some of us may be things you never thought about before. If you don't understand how heat exhaustion, heat cramps, and stuff like that work, you don't take it into account. If you're just pounding back distilled water that you bought from Wally World or something like that, thinking that you're doing yourself good and not realizing that without the electrolytes and stuff in there, that it could potentially lead to more problems for you. What you up to there, Ben?
I'm just seeing if I can reactivate my camera. So I unplugged it and replugged it in.
Gotcha. Yeah, and Red Bear, thanks for throwing in the comments there, but I guess I should have checked there first. 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. And I mean, those are extreme circumstances. You don't want to go 3 full days without water, especially if you're putting any kind of strain on your body, especially in this heat. I would, in the kind of heat we've been having here in Atlantic Canada, I don't know if you get the 3 days out of it. Like, there's heat warnings out in effect everywhere. And if you are trying to do stuff and you're sweating a lot, that 3 days is going to shrink hard. 3 days without water is basically you're sitting still trying to conserve water.
I don't seem to be able to get my camera to go back.
Just go into OBS or OSB, whatever the hell it's called, and re-add your camera in there, and that'll probably sort it out for you, Ben.
I tried that.
Okay, well then, I guess we get to look at the trees behind your photo in general.
I was gonna say we were talking about potentially not running this one too long tonight, anyways. So
Yeah, this was just kind of a quick thing. Because it is an issue if you're not aware of it, and that's all I really wanted to bring to the table with this whole topic was just to be aware of it. Those that are normally aware of it, like I said, this is going to be kind of an eye roller for you. But those of you that are new to this, once again, don't understand how heat absorption, I guess, works and how to cool your body. Hopefully, there's a few things in here that you pick out that actually works for you. Big one's a shade. Just to recap, while Ben's still trying to figure out his camera there, is shade is your friend. If you can keep the sun off you, that's going to keep you cooler. Now you're up in the top corner.
yeah, there's an option.
Close enough. Yeah, keep the shade over your body, keep the sun off you. If you do sunburn, that's going to lead to some other problems with you too. Like I said, as your body tries to fight that burn, it's going to produce a little bit of heat. You're going to have the annoyance of the sunburn, and it's just going to make your life even worse. If you are drinking water, that's great. Make sure there's some electrolytes in there. You can actually get electrolyte packets. And I used to get them from a store called Linmac. I don't know, that store was long gone out of business, but it was a safety supply store, and it was literally just electrolyte supplement that you dumped in a bottle of water. It had very little flavor, might have been slightly salty if I remember correctly. Um, and it was just that. It was an electrolyte replenishment. But I mean, if you Powerade, Gatorade's your thing, by all means go for it. Just watch the sugars and stuff in those because they can lead to crashing. Like you'll get these big energy bursts and you'll probably do more than you should because you feel like you're full of all this energy. And then you burn off all this energy, plus you're sweating a whole bunch, and you've drank up your water supply and potentially your electrolyte replenishment. Um, and it can cause you some problems there. The big thing when it's hot out, move methodically and slow down. I mean, in the woods in general, we've said this before, just slow down, take your time. And that's true in rough terrain, cold weather, and hot weather because it's going to help you. You make less mistakes, you burn less energy, you sweat less.
So,
salt tablets, that's the other one. Sorry, Red Bear just threw that one in there.
Just going to throw a few things out there just so that we've sort of covered, I think, the big things. Drink fluids, preferably with electrolytes or salt, which is an electrolyte. Where possible, get in the shade. Wear proper protective clothing that kind of keeps the sun and stuff off of you. And evaporation is your friend in high heat. So if you can get you can add moisture to your clothing so it can evaporate off. That's helpful. Do be careful about like cold shocking your body. If you come across like a really cold water and dunk yourself in, that could be shocking to your body and your system, especially in a period where you're already having trouble regulating the heat. So similar with was it frostburn or hypothermia, you don't necessarily want to bring someone up to the temperature too quick. You want to bring them up at a reasonable rate. Ideally, in a spot where you've gone too far, it would be done with the supervision of a doctor. But in the meantime, you do with what you can, right?
And that's a really good point. As you warm up, your blood vessels and stuff dilate to try and burn off some of that heat. If you find a nice cold spring or something like that and dunk yourself in it, remember that all these blood vessels that are dilated, you just shock them cold, and your body's going to pull that blood through its system and into your core, and you can actually throw your body into straight up shock. It gets that sudden drop inside, even though it may not be, the sudden risk of freezing to death out there. Your body goes into cold shock because you just drug all this cool blood into the core. It goes, oh God, my core, my important organs, my brain, heart, lungs, it's all getting cold. I got to start pulling all the blood and stuff in from the extremities and try and warm that back up. And it does this really weird effect where you cool off and then all of a sudden your body heat skyrockets and it throws you literally go into shock.
So I think those are the main things we wanted to cover. Um, so unless you have anything else, I would. I do have a few things I have to do, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, be aware of the temperature. Be aware of yourself. If you start to notice some major differences, if you start to feel nauseous, or those around you start to feel nauseous, keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on their temperature. Make sure that they're drinking. If they need to get into shade, get into shade. If they're wearing tight clothing, loosen the clothing. Allow them to breathe. And you know, the earlier you deal with any of these health issues, the better the long-term outcome is. And by that we both mean, if you can deal with it now, it's going to be a much better recovery than dealing with it once it's gone to the point where maybe you absolutely need a doctor. It makes the difference between a few minutes recovery time to maybe a few days recovery time, or no recovery at all, if pushed to the absolute extreme limit. So these are things to keep in mind. You can also suffer from permanent damage and survive from certain injuries. So keep that in mind too.
If you go into heat stroke and your body temperature goes up too much, you can actually, I mean, in extreme cases, death. Slightly less extreme, but still extreme. You can get brain damage from it. It actually cooks part of your brain. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Not cooks. That's a bad thing to say. You're not getting up to the point where you're actually cooking meat. But your body, as Ben said way back at the start of this, it's only meant to be so tolerant to temperature changes. And it only takes, I think it's 1 degree drop for hypothermia and 1 degree over your regular body temperature to start causing some really funky things.
Well, brain cells and other cells start to die once they're pushed beyond their limit, and that's something you can't necessarily fully recover from. So
Uh,
protecting ourselves is important.
And just because they were said, I always like to try and include everybody's comments just before we finish off there, Ben, to run through a few things here. Nomadic Hacker, his uncle was hospitalized because he drank 3 gallons of water and flushed all the electrolytes out of his body.
Yeah, there,
Very
there,
easy thing to do. It's really common.
there is I think it was an Olympic runner a few years back that drank nothing but distilled water for a race, and I believe they died at the finish line. For that exact reason, there was no electrolytes left in their body by the time they were finished the marathon. So, keep that in mind. Pure water is not necessarily a good thing. We need the electrolytes. We need the other things in our system, right?
And that's why, oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, we talked about it in the past. The word salary comes from the word salt, which is what you were worth back in the day. You're worth your salt is an expression, because if you didn't get your salt, you died.
I mean, realize the electrolytes in your blood is what carries the electrical system, or sorry, the electrolytes in your body is what carries the electrical impulses from your body through your nervous system, or at least it aids in it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a medical doctor here. Um, and the last thing was from Red Bear there. He said take breaks during the hottest part of the day. Places in Mexico shut down every day for a couple hours at midday just because it's so hot. And I mean, much like if you're out in the woods, if it starts getting really hot and you start having a hard time breathing, start getting muscle cramps, stuff like that, just shut her down. You know what? Get somewhere where you're in a little shade, hopefully a little breeze, splash a little water in yourself, and just shut her down. It's not worth it, honestly. Once it cools off a little bit, you can get back into it.
Yeah. Okay. As we always say, get out there and have fun. If it's too hot, take a rest. Drink some water. Get in the shade. Enjoy it. It's always good if you can do it again. So, take care of yourselves while you're out there.
Be safe out there, folks. I'll see you next week.
Bye out.